Thank you all. Welcome to Wonderland. I love saying that. I'm very excited about this panel tonight, about this discussion. We were just saying in the back, I want to hear the discussion from both ends. So I'm just going to make a quick intro. Rebecca Gale will be moderating tonight. Award-winning journalist. Love her work, her amazing work that's appeared in the Times and in the Post, and I just can't wait for this discussion tonight with Nancy and the others. And Rebecca, I'm just going to let you take it away. Okay. Thank you all. Enjoy.
I'm Rebecca Gale, and I'm a writer and reporter with the Better Life Lab at New America. And I'm also the author of the Substack. It doesn't have to be this hard, and it's free to subscribe, so I'd encourage you to sign up. So let me say a brief thing about Nancy before I introduce the panel. Nancy, Reddy, and I met through Substack because we are fans and followers of one another's work, and immediately became kindred spirits because we both write about the intersection of motherhood and the outside world. So imagine the world as a globe, and becoming a mother is this meteor that happens to strike each of us at a particular place and time. So it makes an impact no matter where it hits, but it also reverberates differently depending on who you are and what is going on in your life at the time, or what sort of supports you have. So when I picked up The Good Mother Myth, which is right here, I felt like it finally offered an explanation as to why so many of our ideas about parenthood don't fit neatly into our lived experience. And this is part of what we're going to talk about tonight, how and why Nancy wrote this book, what she found, and what she's been hearing from readers since it's been out in the world. And we're joined by two other dynamic women who I will have them introduce themselves very briefly, and you want to go, Andrea?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrea Kleinbard. I am the DC chapter founder of an organization called Chamber of Mothers, which is a 501c3 nationally active org that fights for paid leave for all, maternal health, and affordable, accessible childcare. And I am the founder of the DC chapter. If you are in the area, which I hope many of you are, please consider joining our group. If you're not in the area, we've got 46 chapters and growing. And I'll stop there.
And my dear friend, Mikah Goldman Berg.
Hi everybody, my name is Mikah. Is Mama? Can I pass it? Hold it. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I missed the several times of the instructions. I work for an organization called Postpartum Support International, which does a whole host of things. In particular, I work with our 51 chapters. We have one in every state plus Washington, D.C. that raise awareness around perinatal mental health for the family. And work to educate the community and the public about what that means and how to support families.
So I have a few questions I want to start with for Nancy. And if you haven't had a chance to read The Good Mother Myth yet, I know it's just out. It really is the research behind the research. And Nancy has basically gone in and taken some of these very long-held established ideas, found the research behind them, and sort of systematically goes through and debunks a lot of it. So I've been very impressed with the level of detail and research, but my question for her is, how did you find so many of these things out? And at what point in the process did you have your aha moment where you knew you were onto something?
That's a good question. So part of the story of the book and the story of my life is that I was in graduate school. My kids were born, and so I was in a PhD program being trained as a researcher, and I feel like I probably always had a brain that was like, but wait, like what is the backstory? Is that really true? And like that's also the kind of training of my PhD program, was to be like, which is in English, composition and rhetoric is a subfield. And so I think I had a brain that was like, wait, this is the idea that we have, but how do we know? Like, what's the evidence for that? I started the book and the kind of research part of the book. You're welcome to like come in if you want to. This is what I was telling people to sit in the
Sorry, we're casual here.
Assuming you're here for this event. And if not, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. So started the research process of the book, and also started the book with Harry Harlow, who is a psychologist at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where I was in school when my children were born. And that's a study in part that I think if people aren't familiar with it, if you took like an intro psych class, you probably have this image of these like baby monkeys clinging to these kind of like claws. Yeah, like it's burned in your brain. And if not, well, and Rebecca put it in her interview, so you can find it there. And it's this study that ostensibly showed that what babies need most is contact comfort. They need a totally available mother all the time. That's what makes a healthy monkey. And that's the image that got picked up by other scientists and by the popular press, right? Like this is the late 50s, like this is what a mother should be, leaving aside, of course, the fact that like a monkey is not a human. We're primates, but there's a lot of different kinds of primates. That those monkeys had mothers who were not made of wire. And that actually, like Harlow's research, there's like this fascinating moment at the end of like his first talk about it, where he says something like, given that lactation is a variable of negligible importance, because he writes like that. But what he really is saying is that because you don't have to nurse, you don't have to have breasts to be a mother, anyone can mother. Fathers can mother too. And that's the part that doesn't get picked up. And I think it's these things being like, wait, this research study has been picked up to make all of these arguments. And there's actually a lot more to the story than the parts that got circulated, where I felt like, oh, there's more to the story here than kind of what we've been told.
Well, let me ask you another one about the more to the story, which is John Bowlby, Bowlby, is that right?
That's what I said.
Yeah. This guy's all over her book, and he lists the evils that would contribute to a disaster at home, which include full-time employment of the mother, and he lists this alongside war, famine, death of a parent, desertion, or imprisonment. Which we're laughing, right? It's like, that's crazy. But at the time, it was taken very seriously. So I'm curious if you can give some context as to when this came out, and why do you think it was received with no unquestionably?
Yeah, I mean, that was published in a report that he was commissioned to write by the World Health Organization, right? Like, so you're talking about something that, right? And we can laugh at it now, but like it really was circulated as if like a working mother is as dangerous for her child as if she is dead. And like, that's, yeah, thank you. That's insane, right? So this is also, post-war, a lot of scientists and, public intellectuals and politicians and policymakers, in the UK and in the US and other parts of the world that were affected by World War II are trying to understand, like, what do children need in order to grow up to be healthy adults? So many children, especially in the UK, had been really genuinely traumatized by the war, right? So he's enlisted in doing this research trip to try to understand how do we help these children? And the answer that he came back with was, it's the mother's fault, which is, yeah, exactly, right? Is bonkers, but I think it's I don't know. I mean, we can laugh at his answer now, but I think it's a kind of idea that is still so deeply embedded in our consciousness. The idea that, for better or worse, the mothers are the ones who are responsible for physical health, emotional health, social adjustment, all of those kinds of things.
So let's contrast this with another researcher in your book, Margaret Mead, who had a very different outlook on both parenting and researching families.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Sure.
So Mead was one of the, for me, like really beautiful surprises kind of late in the book. She was someone who kept coming up. Bowlby and all these other scientists would be at these meetings that were convened by the WHO. And, as I was reading about the accounts of them, Mead keeps being there. And she at that time was she's very famous, right? Coming of Age in Samoa had come out, decades before, was an incredible bestseller. She worked at the Museum of Natural History in New York. She's very famous and very well respected. And you can see even in the transcripts, these men kind of like just dismissing her. And as they're saying, oh, this thing about mothers, this thing, she's kind of like, well, that's not really, like, no. Like, if you research it this way, and in part, it's, to me, this is deeply nerdy, but to me, it's something about kind of discipline and how we know what we know. A lot of the men who were doing the research, Bowlby and Harlow, were men who were trained in psychology, they were trained in medicine, and they were trained with a very, like, you do an experiment in a lab, and that's how you know things. Mead was an anthropologist, so she went to communities and she lived there for a long period of time, and she learned the language and she got to know people, and she certainly is like a woman of her time, right? Like, she comes back, she talks about primitives, like, not great entirely, but she did take seriously the idea that people who are very different from her might know something that she could learn from. And she came back from Samoa like having seen that children do really well when they're raised and cared for by lots of people. I mean, what she said in rebuttal to Bowlby, which I think is really powerful, is the idea that what children need is not one perfect mother, like this perfect cloth mother that Bowlby and Harlow were advocating for, but, quote, many warm, friendly people. And I think that's such a beautiful, like, kind of light for us to all think about.
Well, this actually segues next to the question I want to ask to you and the rest of our panel. Your book has this amazing dedication at the front of it about, it says, like, for any mother who thinks they're not good enough, like, you're already doing great. And you talk about, for anyone who needs more help, to reach out to Postpartum Support International. So I want to hear from you sort of how some of your own experience with postpartum, any sort of postpartum effects, both influenced your writing and what sort of led you to have this be what you're leading with in the book.
Sure. I mean, so my experience of having my first son especially was that, as I write in the book, like, I studied and I practiced and I learned the rules and I was ready. And because he was a terrible sleeper, he had a really tough time with breastfeeding, like nurse and then scream, like just, and also just, I found very quickly, which I don't know, you'll have to let me know if this connects for you. I suspect it does, that like motherhood and mothering is not actually something you can be good at in the way that I had been good at other things in my life. And I felt really bad and I felt really alone and I didn't have a framework for understanding what was happening to me. I think that I had a very like limited and stereotyped idea of what postpartum depression was. And I was like, well, I don't know that. I'm not like crying in bed. So like, what's my problem? My problem is that like, I'm an asshole who like, I'm like a, bad mom. So I need to try harder. And it took me I think it was years before I learned that actually there is a range of postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. Like I remember reading the like postpartum anxiety like kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's me. There I am. And it wasn't until, I think I said this in response to your interview, like seeing someone that I love like years later have a baby and really struggle and get therapy. And then go to a psychiatrist and get some medication. I was like, oh, you could do that? Like, you could just get help instead of white knuckling. And that was it took me a long time to come around. And I'm trying not to cry. But, part of what got me through that time was some very dear friends who are here, who really were, like, our warm, friendly people. I don't know. So there's that part of it, right? There's our ideas that we have about what it means to be a good mom, but then there's also like the community that we need in order to get through. I think especially the early postpartum, but also parenting in general, man. Like the whole journey.
Well, I want to also pose a question to Mikah in terms of what Nancy said about getting help and raising awareness. And we've seen the perinatal and postpartum mood disorders awareness drastically change even in the last decade. Like I've seen the difference between having my first kid and my third kid, the way these were talked about. So I'd love to hear from you about what you've seen the landscape change and what people should do if they,
Sure. I turned it off. There. Okay. The landscape has changed a lot, which I think is amazing, and I think that's really because of Nancy. And people are talking up about their experiences. I had postpartum anxiety and very severe postpartum depression after my first anxiety with my first, depression with my second. It was really fun. It was good. Good times all around. And I found Postpartum Support International like as a support for me, and I had an in-person support group to go to, and just being able to be around other people and hear them share their stories, which were not so much like mine, but enough to be like, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this. And I think that the way that motherhood is set up for us to be all of the things all of the time to everybody to have like a space to say, I just feel like I'm broken right now, and have people being like, you're not broken, you're not alone, and you're getting help. You'll get through this. Was really life-changing for me and really altered my professional trajectory, where now I'm working for Postpartum Support International. So, yeah.
Yeah. Also, it goes back to some of what you were saying that Mead says, that it's not really meant to be done alone, individual.
Right?
Yeah, and I want to ask you about some of the community work that I know Chamber of Mothers does to make sure people don't feel alone doing this huge task. So let's hear more about that.
We are all about community. We are all about community because we believe in the health of the mother, in the health of the child, and the health of every American. And what we see, and we talk about this a lot, women are, for the reasons that this book so beautifully and like enragingly details. I was like, I feel like I need to just go through all the pieces I underlined, but we'll be here until midnight and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I won't. But as women, because of unintentional and very intentional messaging that we have received since our own infancy, we so often internalize a systemic problem. We take a problem of the system and we just own it. We just swallow it and it just seeps through our veins like a poison. And the reason mothering is so hard, the reason mothering feels so hard in America isn't because we're doing it wrong. It's because it is so hard in America. And we see this at Chamber of Mothers as a social, emotional, really complex web of problems. And we kind of tackle it two ways. One is community. So I was chit-chatting before with this lovely group and I was saying, at the beginning of our first Chamber of Mothers meetings, we'd do like a 5-minute intro to like share your thoughts and feelings. And then we'd get down to work. And now it's like the first 30 minutes of our 60-minute meeting is just talking about like, how are you feeling? Why? What is just something you just need another mother to hear? And we see that community work as extremely powerful. We see it as not superfluous and like a cute feminine add-on, but actually part of our resistance work. And then in addition to, in tandem with that, we see our resistance work as very tactical. So we have 6 advocacy days a year with senators and Congress members on both sides of the aisle. Most of us are pretty liberal and progressive. And I was just saying, we have a pro bono partner at Crowell and Mooring, a law firm downtown. They've been really lovely. And one of them gave us a talk on how to speak Republican. And I was like, oh, this is really good. Apparently you're not supposed to talk about, forgive any Republicans in the audience, I don't know. You're not supposed to talk about rights, you're supposed to talk about problems. So it's not like mothers, it's a human right for mothers to have support when we are bringing up the next generation of Americans and Social Security payers, if that's all you care about. You have to say there's a problem. Women in your state are dying. They're not gonna vote for you if they keep dying. Let's let them not die after they give birth. And I can go on and on about that.
Time to be laughing about that.
I know. But you have to laugh because joy is an act of spiritual resistance, and here we are in it together. But I think the Chamber of Mothers is founded on both of those approaches, this community based support and then also really tactical change. We talked a lot about our last meeting about this is our chance to turn our anxiety into some action and how therapeutic that can be.
That's awesome. That's great. I have heard that too, about how the right and the left approach care issues differently. Like the left talks about care work and caregiving and care policy, and the right talks about family policy, motherhood and fatherhood. But I actually want to talk a bit about fatherhood because in the book, let's do it. In the book, a lot of the men who are doing this research are fairly absent fathers, and multiple times they are married to someone they meet at work at the university, and the university then makes them, women have to quit their job because you cannot both be employed if you are married. Which it sounds like was a policy in place until very recently. So I sort of had a question for all of you, for the whole panel on the role of fathers, the role of fathers in the good mother myth, and the role of fathers as being part of this larger community.
I mean, I would say kind of like the big picture of it, aside from like these enraging specific men in the book, is that I think at the same time as we have these like enormous and just like superhuman expectations from others, we oftentimes like expect way too little of fathers. And I think this is, read the book, you can learn all about like some of the really hard parts of my marriage, which is doing great now. Like my husband is at home with my kids, they're doing great. I was like, I'll see you later. But a lot of that shift had to go from me being like, I am the one who is supposed to be doing this. And when I realized I couldn't do that I couldn't actually be the only parent, feeling like I need help. I'm not getting the help that I need. I am resentful that I need help. I'm resentful that you're not doing enough. And I think that like really actually looking for and like allowing my husband to really be a co-parent like really changed our marriage, changed our family, like all of the, I don't know, that just got very personal, but
it's in the book too though.
It's also in the book, so yeah, I know. And he read those parts before it came out because I was like, hey, by the way. Yeah, and I just think like we so often like we don't have good, rich kind of cultural narratives about what it means to be a good dad, I don't think. And we don't oftentimes like I think equip men with ways of how to do that. And yeah, I don't know. I'll stop there, but I think it's yeah, I would love to. Yeah.
So I hear, and forgive me if I'm projecting, I hear an undertone of when you're saying that about yourself, I hear an undertone of I had to let go. I had to ask for help, as though like crazy woman.
I know. Yeah.
Crazy, like I had to learn to let go, and it's like no.
Yeah.
I, as the woman parent, am the one who's going to be faulted and held responsible for a shared failure, perceived failure in parenting.
Yeah.
So it's not that like, here I am, here you are, here we are, like, well, I'm just that control freak mom.
Yeah.
And like, I just gotta learn to let daddy lean in.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, if I let him lean in and like, girly girl shows up to daycare with a rat's nest in her hair, but I'm the one who dropped her off and he was the one who was supposed to do her hair. I can't put a name tag on like daddy tried her hair today, even though if he were the one who dropped her off.
I say that on Instagram, makes me so mad. I'm like, learn to brush the
like,
hair.
This is my point. It's not, even when it's not intentionally weaponized incompetence, it is it's incompetence handed to men on a silver platter.
Yes.
And men, in my mind, I have a ton of hope. I think this is a place I feel super optimistic. Like, men leaning in are the solution. I mean, RBG said it better, and I'm going to butcher her quote, but like, we will have achieved true equality when men share the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. That's how we're going to get equality at the workplace. It's how we're going to get equality at home. It's how we're going to contribute to the shared responsibility. But I do often hear, even in very feminist circles, like, well, women need to stop gatekeeping. And I know you're not saying that. And I just want to sort of underscore, like, the reason we're often feeling forced to gatekeep is because of the research that you talk about in your book.
And that's a helpful reminder, right? Because I do think the concept of maternal gatekeeping is a really interesting one. We don't send you down that road, but it's helpful to be reminded that like I did not invent that idea on my own. I was not like Nancy. Like, I am kind of bossy and controlling.
I'm right there.
But I didn't invent that as it related to my kids. And it is a lot of work in like an ongoing way, as I imagine a lot of people can understand, to like share the work. Like, my kids are in school now, and it's like, if I don't want to always be the one who gets all the communication, like, it requires a lot of work to actually get both parents involved.
I have to say, this part of the book with your relationship with your husband really resonated with me in a lot of ways, because I felt like I was like, oh my God, this is like me. And not that I was gatekeeping. I think it was, I also am a product of divorce. I'm a single mom. Yeah. And she was everything. She was everything to my family, right? Like, she did it all. Yeah. So I even like when thinking about, like I'm going to be like my mom. Like, I'm going to do it all. I don't need, like, when I was even thinking about like what it means to have a partnership or have another parent there, was like, he was like non-existent for me, So that was kind of something I brought into that relationship. But I think something that gets discounted a lot is that, like, while 1 in 5 moms suffer from a perinatal mental health disorder, and 1 in 10 dads do. So like the impacts of the mental health of the family unit needs to be discussed more, because dads are impacted by what's going on with us also, and everybody needs help. I think one of my advocacy leads for our California chapter talks about parenthood with the baby as like a tripod, and if you take one of those pieces off, it just falls. So it's just something to, I think, add into the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
I really loved the thing that Andrea said earlier about how women internalize systematic failures as their own. And this comes up a lot in your book, the individual nature. But you also have some really lovely moments when people, you mentioned that some of them are here, were able to support you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for each of you, what does support look like? And you
That's
talk
such a
about
good
community,
question.
you talk about these things, but when we're talking about really in these tough moments, and I don't think we can talk also about policy supports too, but what does the support look like on the micro level? And then we can talk also what it might look like on the macro level. You want to go first?
Sure. I mean, and so I had just an event in the beginning of March in Wisconsin with the sociologist Jessica Clarko, who wrote the book Holding It Together, which is a fabulous book. And I have a line in the book that's like kind of throwaway, kind of jokey line about like, oh, we can't solve all our problems by going to Sweden because like the gender wage gap still exists in Scandinavian countries, and it is better. Like, and she gave me a little bit of a hard time about it, though in like a kind way. But she's like, "Don't you believe in policy?" And I was like, "I mean, sure. Like, yes, I believe in policy. Like, I'm not a total nihilist. Like, but I do. In part, it feels like we know in a big way what the answers are, right? Like, we need universal health care. We need like affordable childcare. We need like we know what the answers are, and I don't really have any faith we're gonna, maybe I shouldn't say that. It feels very hard to get those things right now. But I know that they're like, but I do know, and I know, I mean, maybe you can talk about this, Rebecca's done work on childcare legislation in Vermont that actually is really meaningful. There are these points of hope. But she's kind of like, oh, what are the, you don't believe in policy. And I was like, well, I don't really know. But I was like, I think we get stuck, like either thinking at an individual level, like what do I need? How can I get help? How can I help someone else? Or at a policy level, like we think of ourselves as individuals, or we think at this like really high structural level. And I was like, I think there's actually a middle thing, which is like all of us together, right? Like I cannot make childcare affordable for everyone who lives in my town, but I can help my neighbors with carpool. Like that is something that I can do that is actually really meaningful, right? Like, and so I think a lot about that, kind of like that middle level of supporting people. I mean, I talk in the book about just like the practical, like coming and sitting at my house with me. Like I cannot get it together to like get out of the house in a particular time, but if you will come sit with me and feel like a person, like that makes a huge difference. Yeah, I'll pause there because I want to know what other people have to say.
You go ahead.
I think the question was about support. I went on a long tangent, but the question was about support.
Okay.
Me too.
Do you want to?
I can always talk. I have lots to say. I don't have like a well-formulated answer for that yet, but I have lots of thoughts. I'm still processing too, and I don't think this counts as a middle thing. For me, the support that was most meaningful, I'm hesitant to even call it support, came from my male partner in parenting. And I don't like to call it support because one thing that really grinds my gears is when anyone refers to my husband as helping me in any way, shape, or form, if it's related to caregiving or housekeeping. The biggest offender is my beloved, I'm so sorry if you're watching this, Mom, my beloved, well-intentioned mother. Gosh, that Martin, he just changes those diapers. Yeah, he does, Ma, so do I. I've never seen you compliment my outstanding diaper changing skills. So thank you so much. And I don't know if he like is scared of me or if he's just like a really good feminist or what, but we had really deep conversations before we decided to try to get pregnant. So we were together for about 10 years. We both cared deeply about our work before we started trying to get pregnant. And I told him, I was like, I could be the dad yesterday. Like I would be ready for parenting if I could be the dad, the 1980s dad, swoop in for some pep talks, like pay for the birthday party, give some good advice. Like I am down for that. I love kids. And I wasn't yet ready to be a mom. And so we talked really deeply about that for a long time. And again, maybe I like put the fear of God in him in some way. That's like, poor guy. But he came into parenting with his like charged task of like, this is going to be physically ravaging for her at the very least. And I'm doing jack to grow this baby and to produce milk for this baby.
Yeah.
So I need to be doing everything else. And I think for me, I still suffered from pretty bad postpartum anxiety, but it would have been tenfold had I not had that level of support. Wow. But I still think that speaks to the micro level, and I wish I had a clearer answer for that middle level, because I agree that's really powerful.
Oh gosh, so many things. Okay, so I'll talk about personally first. So I went into a parenthood journey dealing with infertility, and also went into it having mental health condition that like I've been dealing with my entire life. So we had to have my husband and I had to have a lot of conversations about what that looks like. We had a reproductive psychiatrist that was able to chat with me about my medications. I had a therapist who had a PMHC, which is the certification that Postpartum Support International offers to make sure that they knew about perinatal mental health, which looks that depression or anxiety or OCD looks very different than somebody who is not a perinatal person. So we had a ton of resources, and my husband really was able to support me in a lot of ways, but it didn't feel like meaningful support, if I'm being honest, at the time. Like I was on medication, I couldn't breastfeed. He did the night feedings. That was a godsend, believe me, because one of the things my psychiatrist at the time was that I needed to get at least 5 contiguous hours a night of sleep, where I was at high risk for postpartum psychosis. And that was something that we discussed, and like,
that's a like bright line.
We had truly planned for, but I really feel like my village of friends really stepped up, and that meant the world to me. Like, just people to check in on me during the day, people to go on walks. We had a meal train for weeks after both girls were born. It just was such an important thing for my village to be there for me, and for people to come and hold the baby and all of that stuff too. But like, systemically, we have a long way to go, right? Like, there's a lot of supports that parents need. I personally tend to think about the mental health support, like when you go to the hospital, is there a pamphlet for where you need to go and what providers? Or like, if you are getting screened at a pediatrician appointment and they're like, oh wow, you screened high. This happened to me. You screened high on this. And I was like, okay. And then like nothing. Like, you're not referred anywhere. Like, where is that referral process? We know that only 20% of women are being screened. And even when you are screened, where is that referral coming from? So there are, it's like 75% of women go untreated, which has a really huge financial impacts. If you want to talk about Republican talking points, financial impact of what this does to our economy.
Yeah,
so
it's true. I want to ask the panel another question, and then we talked about it being also a turn and talk. So I'm starting to ask as the panel, then we're actually going to encourage the audience to sort of talk to the person next to you. Sort of answer the question. But the broader question I want to throw out there is, what of these good mother myths surprised you the most? Either as the researcher or as the reader. Like, I mean, we sort of like talked about some of the ones that are more sensational, but when you did the digging, when you walk away from this whole experience having researched the book, what is one of the things that you were surprised to hear or helped you reshape something? It doesn't be the most. It could be just one thing that surprised you. It's hard to think of one. But I'd be curious also for both of your takes as well, since I know you guys read the book and had a pretty strong reaction.
Do either of you have any? Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know, you're ready?
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh
my goodness.
I'm always ready to talk. I love
it. Got
it
it.
doesn't even go here. Not the other study. I'm going to butcher it. The strange.
Oh yeah. Strange situation.
Strange situation. This is crazy because I feel all my Instagram.
Can you remind with it?
Yeah. Okay, so all my Instagram therapists, with whom I credit so much of my mental health, talk about like how to raise securely attached children. And to me, the goal within that I still hold on to is like, I want my girls to feel fulfilled in themselves, that like a marital partner is a bonus, that they are like so innately worthy that they would never settle for anyone besides someone who like thinks that deeply about them as well. And that's really important to me. And that job title, the figurative gold stars that I'm still unlearning within myself is like not what needs to drive them. They're innately worthy for who they are. And like my Instagram therapists tell me that like we get there by my partner and I telling them like how much like they're innately worthy, not asking them how the test went, but just tell them when I look into your eyes, you light me up inside, all that stuff. And so I, before reading your book, would have been like, yeah, super pro attachment theory. And to me, but that's my definition of attachment.
Yeah.
Or what I've just talked through. But what you talk about in the book is this strange situation experiment, which I definitely read about a million times before in college or whatever, and took as like gospel of like established science, which is like, if you put a baby in a room and they're freaking out or a toddler, but then the caregiver comes back and they're immediately comforted by the caregiver, then like you're good. The baby's gonna be happy, they're gonna get A's in college, they're gonna have a beautiful garden, like you're totally
happy
set.
Marriage,
right? All the things. And if the caregiver comes back and like the baby's not immediately comforted, like God, you're such a bad parent, and like it's just over for
disaster.
them. And obviously, I'm being like somewhat facetious. But not really. And your description of how flawed that study is and how part of the reason that became so prolific and people will replicate it and all of that is simply for tactical, logistical reasons. It's really easy to just get some people in a room and bring them in, as opposed to your more anthropological, much more expensive, hard to resource, and more complex, nuanced work of studying real families in their environment and communities in their environment. That really blew my mind because I saw that as sort of like a established science, and I no longer feel that way.
And Margaret Mead, the one who did all of that work, was hard to be taken seriously because she was a woman, and then she was also sort of really excoriated for being not a good mom because she was traveling. So she sort of had, both sides of the coin at her.
Yeah, I also had this problem with Instagram. And I was like, this is the perfect way to be the perfect mom with this attached children who are like secure in themselves. And what I have actually found interesting in reading your book and also just in real life is that you can believe it, an anxious mother sometimes produces anxious children, and this reaffirmation to your kids that they're going to be okay. One of my kids' therapists is like, stop doing that. Stop reassuring them. Like they need to find reassurance in themselves. So like it's more like, you got this. Instead of being like, you're great, we love you, we're so proud of you all the time.
I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I think about is just like to the point of the A student gold star, right? Like I wrote a whole book about like trying to give up on the idea of like goodness, right? Like trying to be good. And it still comes up for me all the time. Like a good mom would do da-da-da, like a good kid would blah, blah, blah. And I think the thing for me that is the corrective to that, or maybe corrective, see, like the language is so embedded.
It's not your,
it's the study language.
Oh yeah, exactly. But like my God, the alternative, like the kind of portal to a different way of thinking about things is to like not focus on goodness or good enough or any of those other things, but is to like focus on like the actual kid and kids in front of me, right? Like I think like a good mom is not really a person, and her kids are not really people either, right? They're kind of like factory models made to specifications. And like, again, I mean, I think I learned this in part from like my dear friends who've spent a lot of time with my kids and who like really see them as people. And that to me, like, that's the joy, and that's like the meaning in parenting, is not like, I'm a good mom because I can do this thing and I'll tell people and they'll be like, you did a good job. Right? Like the joy and the meaning is being like, look at you, amazing weirdo. Like that is your deal, and that is so beautiful. And I think like when we lean into that is wonderful. It is so much more of like a deeply satisfying feeling than that kind of momentary like blip of goodness you get when your kid is like in a cute outfit and you got a picture of it, posted it online, and you feel good for a minute, like, should we?
Well, do you want to do questions first? That's a question. Do you want to turn and talk first?
No, I want you to turn and talk first.
All right.
So here's the direction. So we want to invite you all to connect with people next to you. If you are already sitting with people, widen your circle. And I think it is an invitation to widen your circle, I guess. I'm just scolding my friends in particular. So I guess the invitation is to think about maybe a myth of motherhood or a myth of mothering
Or
that maybe
something
you
that
are.
you had a vision of how it would go one way, you had to change that vision.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty
I mean,
broad.
we probably could talk about this for hours.
Unless
but
you
we're not
had
gonna
it
give
all
you
work
that
out the
much.
way you thought it would do. In which case I'd love
Anyone?
to hear about it.
Okay, so please, if you would chat with someone next to you, if you came with someone you know, like widen your circle a little bit. I was a 9th grade English teacher, and Eva was the math teacher next to me. I was just telling horror stories to someone about, we taught in New Orleans in like a very under-resourced school, and our classrooms were adjoining. We had, for some reason, in the back of the room, a door that was meant to connect our classrooms. Terrible idea. You don't want 9th graders to be able to have access to each other. It's not to just like keep them in the room. But then the doorknob fell off or was broken or something, so there was just a hole in the door, and they would throw pencils at each other through it. That's not related to any of this, except that the 9th grade English teacher in me is like, hey, please come back to our whole discussion.
But we want to actually take a few audience questions.
Yes.
So
Or conversations. Like you can tell us what you were thinking about as well.
as Nancy says, a question or a comment.
Yeah, we welcome your comments.
Do you want to microphone?
Sure.
Just press the button to make it.
Research into dads. Did you find any? Is there any? And why or why is there not?
That's such a good question. I did not do a lot of research into dads, just given like the scope of the book. But one of the things that I have probably read about since then and definitely thought about a lot is Chelsea Conaboy's book, Mother Brain, which is largely about like the neuroscience of really the caregiving brain. And she talks about like the brain that is earned by care. And certainly like pregnancy, birth, like early parenthood, like that does set off all of these like really big changes in the brain. But so does caring for a baby. Like dads who are really involved, that also changes their brains. It changes their hormone levels. And I find that really powerful and meaningful, that like caregiving, like the way you learn to care is by doing it, right? It's not that there's something like magical about being a woman or being pregnant that suits you to care. Like the way that you learn to care is through caregiving. But I don't know, like research on fatherhood more broadly.
I mean, I don't think there was. I mean, I think it's a very interesting statement on our society that in the 50s, when all this research was being done on women, there was zero research.
A lot of men doing research on women who were not raising their own children.
Right.
There's a good amount of research on fatherhood.
I'm sure there is. That's what I'm saying. I think it probably is like it is not something that I have pursued on my own. Just given the scope of the book.
Another question?
I have more of a comment. Maybe,
Yes, thank you.
But it speaks to some of what's come up tonight. Something that a lot of moms who I know and I have run into is the dads of our generation are doing so much more than the generations before. And this actually becomes a stumbling block. Because so often, even though they're doing more, it does not mean they're doing half. Equitable work necessarily. For the mental load, for like all of the things that come up. And I know there's fair play and some resources out there that are starting to chip away at that, but I'm wondering if like across that, what you all
There's a really funny, and I can't remember exactly who wrote this now, maybe someone else will remember this. The observation was that, like, in general, as you say, like, a lot of men compare themselves to their fathers, right? Like, and I, you know, like, I know a lot of men who are really committed parents, right? And who really want to be better than their own fathers. And in a lot of cases, their fathers were not great. So they're doing better, which is great. But I think a lot of mothers compare themselves to like the best mother they know, like you know what I mean? So it's like the point of comparison is so different. The funny thing that I'm remembering is that whatever this article was that I read about it, quoted a man who was a medium well-known author who had written a book about his son. His wife is also a writer, and he had said something like, you know, I mean, the men of my father's generation, they didn't really do like the school pickup, you know, but like we're doing the school pickup. And the article was about like who arranges play dates and how like a lot of men won't arrange play dates because they feel like it's awkward to like ask it, you know, see? And he was like, maybe in the next generation, the men can arrange. I'm like, we're talking about texting. Yeah. This is not like an evolutionary, you know, like you don't have to change your DNA to be able to text a woman to see if her kid can hang out with your kid after school. So I don't know. I feel frustrated sometimes with those, which is really like a kind of cultural narrative about how we communicate and who does what kind of work. At the same time as I know a lot of men, and I can picture like the men at my kids' like school pickup who are super engaged dads and like really are doing a lot, as well as men that I know who are not dads, who are really like engaged in a lot of kids' lives and doing really meaningful stuff.
And often getting affirmation though.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the point earlier
Yeah.
of like the gold stars for pickup are
Yeah.
so different than the like, I don't know. I've yet to get gold stars for picking up my children.
Does anyone here follow Mary Catherine Starr on Instagram? Oh, you all should if you don't.
Yeah.
She does cartoons of how men are spoken to versus how women are spoken to in the parenting sphere. And it's not faulting any of these incredible men. It's faulting the system. It's not Martin's fault that my mom praises him so much for the diapers. He's not done anything wrong. He's doing the diapers. But the fact that he is getting so much praise for that is wild. And there's a lot of comparisons she does, so I encourage you to look that up. But one is, she just posted today, it's like, there are just some terms that exist for men that don't exist for women. So like family man, like he just really, there's no family woman. Like, oh my God, she is such a good family woman. I just love hands-on dad. Wow,
Oh, that's
she is
so
such a
interesting.
hands-on mom. I just love that about her. And again, this is not bashing men. Men to me are one of my biggest sources of hope because so many of them are thinking about how to be better equitable parents for the sake of their partners and themselves and their children and the world. It's not their fault, and the language is really powerful.
What are your thoughts on the perspective that, you know, men and women have different strengths, and when it comes to raising children, generally the more naturally nurturing skill set that is really needed from when our children are helpless, from when they're first born or when they're being grown in the womb, are infants, may not be the natural strength of the man. However, and so because of that, for like the tender years, there is a disproportionate reliance upon the nurture that comes from mom. There are things that mom can give that dad is not as good at giving. However, as you grow this young being to be stronger, to be able to like have their own say and personality and back talk, now the shift starts to be, it's a transition bit by bit, where father, who they do look at differently and treat him differently, not because they're sexist, because they're children. Nobody taught them that. I mean, nobody taught my dog to be afraid of me, but not my wife. But they hear the deep voice and they say, oh no, daddy said don't do this. And then daddy becomes really important for things that are like hard boundaries.
I think that you're describing and using natural in a way that has often been like really weaponized against women, like, oh, you're just naturally better at that, and next thing you know, you're doing it. You're also describing to me what feels like a very conventional idea about gender that I actually just don't think is accurate.
Which part?
The idea, and I don't want to like get into this.
No, I apologize.
No, you don't need to apologize. You're totally welcome to ask a question.
I want to buy.
And I appreciate that.
I'm buying I want to understand.
Yeah, no,
I
don't think that gender is as black and white as that. That women are nurturing and men are strong. I also think it's.
I was generalizing.
Okay.
You know, so to be fair, I was generalizing.
I think it's way more layered than
so
that.
one thing also that is actually speaks to your point is a lot of policies haven't kept pace with that. Like paternity leave is still a very recent invention. Paternity leave. It wasn't around for a long time, and it wasn't when it was around. A lot of men couldn't even
and
take
you talked
it.
about this with your own husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've written on this, and also some of the brain changes. The Chelsea Conaby book it talks about this specifically. Happen when the men are able to bond with their baby at the very beginning. So if we had more of these robust policies that, and this is where we throw the Scandinavian countries as this thing where both the men and the women take the paid leave because it's use it or lose it. So it's not like one person can take all of it. if our country could move toward those kind of policies, we probably would see more of the shifts that Nancy talks about in her book, and probably would speak to a lot of the problems you're talking about too. We're not there yet, but maybe someplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to look at. I mean, I have kids, and I'm the oldest of a generation, and I've led a lot of, I've worked a lot with rough teenagers, and there's a difference between how useful I am in some of my skill set for the baby, and then also leading young troubled teenage Marines, or leading, teaching some of the troubled youth in alternative detention centers. And they do treat men and women a little bit differently, and that doesn't mean that there aren't women that could also do the same job just as well, but you end up kind of seeing a bit of like self-selection. And also it's like maybe kids just treating us differently a little bit too. And anyway, that's all. I was throwing it out there.
Can I add a comment? It's very interesting just with what you were saying, because like if you look at my husband, he is 6 foot, former military, manly man. Great. You look at me, I'm very much the kinder, patient, softer touch, nurturing. But I did also go through very severe postpartum depression with my second. I was the best mom, amazing, you're just the perfect new mom. And then 20 months later, I could do nothing. And it was scary and life-changing. But then now, right, 6 years later, I can say it was a blessing, because nobody taught my husband how to be nurturing. He had, and in his defense, he is more afraid of his mother than any other man, any person he went through the army with. He is more afraid of his mom than any other person in the world. And because she was a single mom, taught him discipline, routines, and it's, like I said, oversharing, but I think it's really interesting that, I think his bond with my son is just incredible because of that experience that he had. And I mean, it was an awful, awful consequence of postpartum depression, but it's really changed our relationship. He started, he's a much more logical person. Sure, I'm much more emotional, great. But he started to research and say, oh, neurobiology says that when the baby cries, it's like someone's screaming in your brain, you can't think, you're, like your body hurts. And he was like, why am I making you sleep train this child? Go on this work conference. I had a work conference when she was 8 months old. He's like, go on your work conference. I support you that you're working through this, and I'm going to take on sleep training your baby, our baby. And I never even thought of that as a way to ask him to help me, because I never saw that. So, anyways, for what it's worth.
Thank you for sharing.
Want to move on? We'll do one more question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lauren.
More of a comment than a question.
Love a comment.
But two things.
Lauren's in the book, right?
Lauren's, this is Lauren for the book. Anna, Lauren for the book. If anyone's read it or read it, and then these are my baby date friends. Save my life.
Precious times. So I just wanted to say, I don't know, because of the preconceived roles of motherhood versus fatherhood that we've always had, that have been around for generations, I feel like we disenfranchise men who are naturally very good at caregiving, very nurturing, right? We're just now allowing a lot of them to be fathers at all, right? So, and you talked about there's no strong narratives for what parenting can look like when it plays to different people's strengths regardless of their gender. I'm the scary mom. My children are more terrified of me than my husband by far.
And Chris has a beard that if he shaves in the morning, by lunchtime it grows back.
Yes, he's such a dude's dude. When I met him, I thought he was a dumb jock. He's so he's not, but he's very male in that stereotypical way. But my kids, they can feel it from me the way that you were describing that some kids feel it from a big guy, my dog does too, as a matter of fact. My dog hides under my husband when I'm upset. But we just are only now sort of giving parents whose natural strengths and natural inclinations don't fit the stereotypical roles the chance to parent in a way that works for them and to use their own strengths and to really allow them to do it the best way they can, regardless of how they're supposed to. Also, one of the first prompts you gave us was about what expectations of parenthood did you have to let go of, and I just wanted to sort of rep the disability community and say
thank you.
The window that I opened and began throwing out my expectations and my visions of the future and my preconceived notions didn't close for 3 years. But like on the other side of that experience of like coming to grips with who my kid was and the delightful weirdo that she is, like I'm so settled and happy in it now. And it's really because I had to get rid of all that baggage. It just had to go in order for me to be able to like really embrace this child as she is. And I'm so settled and happy in that relationship with her now. Like she's really honestly the best thing that ever happened to me, and I wouldn't change a thing about her. And I think it's a gift we can give to all parents, but really to parents who were having a much different journey than they thought they were. And it speaks to fertility journeys too, you know, like realizing you never get a say in how this is going to look is really important. And I love second-time parents too. Second-time parents are cracking me up because it's when you have that second one and they turn out completely different than the first one. But you realize like, oh, I have so little control over this. This isn't about me at all. But I feel like that's an important part of the journey.
I want to give each of the panelists a chance to either have a closing thing or mention more about PSI and Chamber of Mothers.
That would be amazing.
One last pitch about that. Each of you guys.
That would be great. Thank you.
Everyone's welcome to join Chamber of Mothers. There's lots of ways to get involved. We have a DC chapter. You can find us on the website. You can email dcchapter@chamberofmothers.org. You can send me your email address or grab Heather or Cassandra in the back. And if that's not necessarily for you, which like it totally is, guys, it's very low lift and very fun. You can follow Chamber of Mothers on Instagram. As I said, we're a national org as well. But we really, really value a diversity of voices and defining motherhood, whatever that means to you. We have adoptive mothers and foster mothers in our group. We have people who are non-binary in our group but identify as mothers. So we see all that caregiving work as connected and valuable and important, and would love to have you on board.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a valuable resource to get involved in a systemic way. I think just to know all of us coming in with different parenting stories, different parenting ideas, and knowing that perhaps it was not an easy go for us to be able to tell others that there is help available. PSI offers many support groups online that are available every single day of the week. Well, not the weekends, just kidding, every weekday. And then also we have peer mentorship program, we have chapters, like there are providers that are looking to get specific with how to help the perinatal community. So you're not alone. And I think that's really what I want everybody to walk away with, is that like anybody you know, mothers, I always ask, you know, when a friend has a new baby, I ask the mom how the mom is before the baby, how's the new baby doing. I think that's like a big thing to make sure that the moms are okay, because moms need to put on, or dads even, the air mask before they can be nurturing and help other people.
Nancy, any closing thoughts?
Oh my, I feel
comments?
Like I don't talk so much. Yeah.
Well, we can.
I think we'll stop here and then we can keep talking if people want to continue separately.
And a big thanks to Wonderland Books.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you. Listen to this for another 3 hours.
Yeah. You can, if you're interested in reading The Good Mother Myth, it is right there. Nancy is also on Substack.
Yeah.
And
I can say that.
Yeah.
I read a newsletter, Write More. It's called Write More, Be Less Careful. It's about the intersection of caregiving and creative work, and I'm very interested in how those things the narrative that I had inherited about motherhood and writing in particular was that like being a mother would be the end of my like creative life. Right? I mean, I don't know. Although I just did an event with visual artists recently as well, and they were telling me that they had taken in that same thing, and I was like, okay, so this is not my individual bad idea that I invented. And I really found in a lot of ways that like mothering has enriched my creative life. And so I have like interviews with lots of writers and people, and so if you are interested in that kind of thing, write more, be less careful.
And are you going to be signing books?
I would love to sign books and just talk and
Well, thank you guys again for coming.
Thank you.